What you're about to hear is one of the darkest industrial disasters in recent American history. On October 10, 2025, a small town in Tennessee was shaken by a massive explosion at a military-grade munitions facility. 19 workers vanished instantly, leaving behind a crater, a trail of smoke, and silence. In the hours that followed, confusion turned to panic, and panic to grief. But beneath the headlines and official statements, questions began to emerge. What really caused the blast, and where are the missing? This is the story behind the Tennessee explosion of 2025. It was supposed to be an ordinary Friday. At 7:32 a.m., workers began their shifts at Accurate Energetic Systems, a munitions manufacturing facility located in McEwen, Tennessee, about 60 miles west of Nashville. The plant, which specialized in military-grade explosives, had been operating under strict federal safety regulations, at least on paper. By 9:48 a.m., locals reported hearing a thunderous explosion that shook homes miles away. Windows shattered, alarms screamed, and a black column of smoke spiraled into the Tennessee sky. 911 lines were immediately flooded. "It sounded like a bomb went off," one resident told reporters. "Everything trembled. I thought it was an earthquake." When first responders arrived, the scene was apocalyptic. The plant's main structure was reduced to twisted metal and craters. Several surrounding buildings were ablaze, and emergency workers described a heat so intense that it melted nearby vehicles. By noon, Hickman County Sheriff's Office confirmed multiple casualties, but 19 employees could not be located. The explosion's epicenter appeared to be a storage unit that contained volatile materials used in detonation systems. But what triggered the blast? Equipment failure, a chemical reaction, or something far more sinister? Federal investigators from the ATF, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, and OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, were dispatched immediately. By sunset, the plant was sealed off, declared a hazard zone. The community waited for answers, but none came. Instead, a new question began to circulate among the locals. How could 19 people simply vanish? When rescue teams finally gained access to the ruins of the Accurate Energetic Systems plant, they expected chaos. Twisted steel, burned remains, fragments of machinery scattered like confetti. What they did not expect was emptiness. Among the dozens of vehicles parked outside that morning, 19 belonged to employees who had clocked in before the explosion. Yet inside the wreckage, not a single trace of them could be found. No bodies, no personal belongings, no signals from their phones or ID trackers. Firefighters initially believed the missing workers had been vaporized by the explosion's intensity, but forensic teams quickly ruled that out. The blast temperature recorded from the core was far too low to completely destroy human remains. "Something doesn't add up," an ATF investigator was overheard saying. "You don't lose 19 people without finding a bone, a boot, something." Families gathered near the perimeter fence, clutching photos and pleading with officials for updates. Among them was Marie Turner, whose husband, Greg, had been working at the plant for over a decade. "They told us to wait," she said tearfully. "But how do you wait when your heart's already breaking?" Over the next 48 hours, rescue dogs were brought in. They picked up faint human scents along the northern perimeter, leading away from the plant toward a nearby wooded area. But the trail ended abruptly near a stream bed. Meanwhile, local authorities imposed a media lockdown. Reporters were pushed back nearly 2 miles from the site. A temporary no-fly zone was declared over McEwen. The official reason? Ongoing hazardous material recovery. Behind closed doors, however, investigators were facing something they could not explain. Drone footage captured by a local journalist before the airspace ban showed a large crater, nearly 40 feet wide, surrounded by geometric burn patterns inconsistent with standard chemical detonations. Privately, one FEMA analyst called the blast unusual, almost surgical. Then came the leaks. 2 anonymous posts on social media, allegedly from first responders, claimed they'd seen strange residue near the center of the explosion. Metallic fragments that emitted a low, pulsing heat days after the fire had gone out. By the time federal teams arrived, the debris had already been removed. The families were told the investigation was ongoing. But for many in McEwen, the silence from Washington spoke louder than any press release. "We deserve to know what happened," said one local pastor during a vigil that Sunday night, "because people don't just disappear into thin air." The following week, one of the search dogs, trained for cadaver detection, collapsed during a sweep of the area. Its handler reported feeling a strange vibration beneath the ground moments before. By the time the sun set over Hickman County that evening, 19 names were now carved into a wall of the lost, their stories swallowed by smoke, their voices fading into a mystery that had only just begun. By the morning of October 11th, Tennessee woke to a headline that was both familiar and horrifying. Industrial explosion at munitions plant, 19 feared dead. Every major network carried the same line, repeated like a mantra, as if carefully rehearsed. Officials promised transparency. They said the blast was under control, that the cause was likely accidental, and that all available resources were being used to locate the missing. But on the ground in McEwen, it felt different, like a story being written in real time, with half the pages torn out. At 10:30 a.m., Sheriff Michael Burgess stood before a wall of cameras, his face pale under the harsh light. "We are coordinating with state and federal authorities," he said. "At this time, there is no evidence of foul play. No evidence, but also no answers." When pressed by reporters about the 19 unaccounted-for workers, the sheriff's tone tightened. "Recovery efforts are ongoing," he repeated. "We'll release details when it's appropriate." Behind him, black smoke still curled above the wreckage, twisting like a question mark against the sky. That afternoon, the ATF released its first official statement. It described the explosion as the result of an unexpected chemical chain reaction, but those words, chemical chain reaction, meant little in a facility that specialized in precision-controlled detonations. Veteran workers, interviewed off-camera, said it was impossible for such an event to happen without multiple system failures. "Everything is monitored," said a former employee named Ray Dalton, who worked at the plant until 2023. "Pressure levels, temperature, storage volume. If something even twitches out of range, alarms go off. That wasn't a mistake. That was something else." Meanwhile, social media erupted. Locals posted photos of military trucks entering McEwen under cover of darkness. Residents living near the plant reported hearing low, mechanical hums echoing through the night, a sound some described as a generator, others as something deeper. Still, the public story didn't change. The governor of Tennessee, in a televised address, called it a tragic industrial accident and praised the heroic response of emergency personnel. He didn't mention the 19 missing workers by name. He didn't mention the strange residue, or the airspace restriction, or why satellite imagery of the area was suddenly classified. By October 12th, media crews began to leave McEwen. The national attention drifted away as quickly as it came, replaced by new headlines, new crises, new distractions. But for the families who stayed, for the mothers, fathers, and children waiting for phone calls that would never come, the silence only grew louder. At night, the smoke from the ruins glowed faintly blue, visible for miles. Locals began calling it the ghost light. And when one resident dared to ask federal officers why the fires still burned days later, the response was brief and chilling. Because what burned here doesn't go out easily. By the 4th day after the explosion, McEwen had changed. The air no longer smelled like smoke. It smelled like metal and rain. The fires were out. The media vans were gone. And what remained was a military-grade perimeter that looked less like an accident scene and more like a classified testing site. Locals noticed it first. Unfamiliar trucks with federal plates, guards with no insignias, and floodlights that stayed on through the night. When questioned, the Tennessee Emergency Management Agency said it was standard post-incident protocol, but the people who lived there knew better. "You don't post soldiers for a clean-up," said David Keller, a volunteer firefighter who'd been among the first to respond. "You do that when there's something you don't want anyone to see." Rumors spread faster than the flames ever had. Some claimed it was a weapons experiment gone wrong, that the plant had been testing next-generation detonators for a classified defense project. Others whispered about a shipment that arrived the night before the explosion, a shipment never logged in the plant's safety records. And then there were the families of the missing, 19 souls trapped between grief and disbelief. They gathered daily outside the security fence, holding candles, demanding answers. The company refused to meet them. The government stopped returning calls. "They're gone," said Lisa Hernandez, whose brother worked at the plant. "But nobody will even say the word dead. It's like they're erasing them." In the local diner, people began noticing black SUVs parked outside at odd hours. The owner, Jack Murdoch, swore he saw one of the men inside speaking with an FBI badge that didn't look quite right. Too plain, too new. "When I looked again," he said, "they were gone." Meanwhile, satellite data leaked online, showing infrared hotspots near the blast zone, thermal activity long after the fire was declared out. Independent experts said it was likely residual heat from metallic compounds. But one former Department of Energy contractor, speaking anonymously, disagreed. "That's not heat. That's a reaction, something still active underground." And perhaps the most chilling detail, within 72 hours of the explosion, multiple residents reported strange interference on their phones and radios, distorted voices, fragmented sentences, and sudden blackouts that coincided with military drone flyovers. It wasn't just paranoia. A local ham radio operator captured an encrypted transmission on October 12th at 2:47 a.m. 3 words repeated in loop: "Containment not stable." When reporters tried to verify the transmission, it disappeared from the online logs. The families were told to remain calm. The official statement said, "Search operations continue." But by the end of the week, the federal agents were gone. The plant site was sealed, and the name Accurate Energetic Systems was scrubbed from its corporate registry. The silence wasn't just eerie, it was strategic. Whatever happened in McEwen, someone wanted it forgotten. 5 days after the blast, the phones of several local journalists buzzed with the same anonymous message. "They're lying about what happened. Check the manifest. AES was storing something that didn't belong there." Attached was a photo, grainy, taken from a security monitor, showing a white truck entering the Accurate Energetic Systems facility at 2:13 a.m. Just 7 hours before the explosion, the truck's license plate had been blurred, but one marking on the cargo container was clear: TX 497, property of DoD. That image would become the first piece of evidence that this wasn't just an industrial accident. The message came from a man identifying himself only as Harlan. He claimed to be a subcontractor who'd worked at the plant for 3 years. According to him, Project TX 497 was part of a classified weapons program, a joint venture between the Department of Defense and a private contractor specializing in energetic materials. It was an experiment, his encrypted email read. Something that could change how explosives behave, adaptive yield, but the reaction wasn't stable. When reporters tried to trace the message, it led to a dead email node in Knoxville. Still, one journalist, Samantha Kerr, managed to arrange a phone call. Harlan agreed to speak, on one condition: no recordings, no names. The conversation lasted 17 minutes. "They told us to store it off the books," he said. "No tracking, no paperwork. It was only supposed to stay 48 hours, but it started reacting on its own. You could hear it, humming." He claimed that engineers had reported the anomaly the night before the explosion, but their alerts were ignored. By morning, the temperature readings in the vault were rising fast, and that was when everything went dark. "It wasn't supposed to detonate," Harlan said. "It was supposed to learn." The call ended abruptly with static, and Kerr's follow-up messages went unanswered. 2 days later, her car was found abandoned near Old Hickory Lake, 40 miles east of McEwen. Her phone, laptop, and the USB drive containing the leaked files were missing. When the story broke, federal agents denied all knowledge of a Project TX-497. They claimed the supposed whistleblower was a hoax, a fabrication meant to distract from the ongoing recovery operation. But one detail stood out. Harlan's photo of the cargo manifest matched an internal military coding format that hadn't been publicly used since 2018. A retired Pentagon analyst reviewed it and confirmed off-record, "That code's real, and if it was delivered to AES, it was never meant to be there." In the weeks that followed, Project Ashfall, as some began calling it online, grew from a rumor into an underground investigation. And while the government stayed silent, one thing became clear. The explosion wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning of a cover-up. 2 weeks after the Tennessee blast, when public attention had already begun to fade, something unexpected happened. At 3:17 a.m., on October 24, 2025, an encrypted file appeared briefly on a deep web message board used by cybersecurity researchers. Its name, TX-497core.log. The file was only online for 7 minutes before vanishing, but in that time, a few users downloaded it, and what they found would reignite the entire investigation. The file contained system diagnostic reports from inside the Accurate Energetic Systems facility, time-stamped between October 9th and 10th, the very night of the explosion. Metadata confirmed it had originated from an internal AES network device, one that should have been destroyed in the blast. Inside were temperature logs, waveform data, and one phrase repeated across multiple entries: resonance anomaly detected, external interference pattern. Cyber analysts quickly realized the logs described something that didn't belong in any conventional explosive system. The resonance pattern wasn't chemical. It was electromagnetic and responsive. That discovery aligned perfectly with the claims of the anonymous whistleblower, Harlan. His warning that the material could learn suddenly sounded less like paranoia and more like fact. A hacker collective calling itself Echo 9 took credit for the leak. In a statement released through an encrypted channel, they claimed to have intercepted partial data from a quarantined Department of Defense node. Their message read, "TX-497 is not a weapon. It's an experiment in self-stabilizing energy. They lost control of it once. They will try again." Within hours, the post disappeared, and the group's main page went dark. But the leak had already spread. Major news outlets hesitated to report it, fearing national security repercussions. Still, independent journalists began connecting the dots, linking AES to federal research grants, black budget contractors, and a handful of cryptic patents filed under shell corporations. One patent in particular stood out, USPN 093441. Resonant Energy Containment Chamber, filed in 2023 by a company called Reyes Technologies, LLC. Reyes had no public profile, no listed employees, and its registered address led to a vacant warehouse in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Oak Ridge, the same city once home to the Manhattan Project. Investigators discovered that Reyes Technologies had received over $14 million in defense funding for non-lethal deterrence research. But no one could explain why a munitions plant would be storing one of its experimental devices. And then, quietly, another layer of mystery surfaced. The Reyes patent was co-signed by someone using the initials WH. It didn't take long for online forums to connect those letters to the name Wade Harlan, the supposed whistleblower who had vanished weeks earlier. If Harlan helped design TX-497, wrote one analyst, then the man who tried to expose it also helped build it. Deceived by late October, the Tennessee explosion was no longer being treated as a workplace tragedy. It was a national security event, shrouded in silence, data wipes, and unexplained disappearances. Every digital trace of TX497 core.log was erased from public servers by federal request, but one mirror remained, buried deep, invisible to search engines. And in its final line of code, analysts found one more phrase. Phase 2 authorization, Oak Ridge. When investigators followed the trail of Reyes Technologies LLC to Oak Ridge, Tennessee, they found more than just a paper company. They found a door that wasn't meant to open. Oak Ridge National Laboratory, ORNL, had long been known as the birthplace of American nuclear innovation, a cornerstone of the Manhattan Project during World War II. But beneath its modern research facade, the facility was still home to classified government projects, most of which never saw the light of day. So when the Reyes Shell Company was traced to an empty building near the Oak Ridge perimeter, a warehouse with blacked-out windows, unmarked trucks, and no public records of entry, the story changed from a local tragedy to a national secret. The warehouse satellite images, taken weeks before the explosion, revealed frequent nighttime activity at the site. Deliveries from military bases across the South, and even one shipment from McEwen, the same town as the AES plant. But after the blast, all traffic stopped. Then, on October 29th, a local utility worker noticed something strange, an unexplained power surge on the city grid, originating near that same abandoned facility. The surge lasted 12 minutes and caused brownouts across several Oak Ridge neighborhoods. When the power stabilized, the worker checked the monitoring logs, only to find the data missing. Entire hours of activity had been deleted remotely. A few days later, a Freedom of Information request filed by journalists was denied. The reason given: request denied under National Security Directive 58042. Restricted defense research. The transfer. That denial confirmed what investigators feared. The TX497 device hadn't been destroyed in McEwen. It had been recovered. One anonymous source from inside Oak Ridge described a shipment arriving on October 18th, marked hazardous material containment. It was escorted by military police and handled by personnel wearing full radiation suits. It wasn't debris, the source said. It was intact. Whatever exploded in McEwen didn't destroy the core. It released it. He claimed the container was stored deep within the laboratory's subterranean vaults, in a wing accessible only to Defense Department researchers. The project name used internally: Phase 2. The Unseen Presence. By early November, residents around Oak Ridge began reporting low vibrations at night, a faint pulsing hum that made windows tremble and pets howl. The official explanation was routine generator testing, but one audio engineer from the University of Tennessee analyzed the frequencies and found something unnerving. The vibrations matched a pattern identical to the electromagnetic resonance logs found in the leaked TX497 core.log file. When confronted with the findings, ORNL declined to comment. The Department of Energy released a short statement. No classified testing is occurring at Oak Ridge involving materials from McEwen. Yet truck drivers on nearby Route 95 described seeing armed convoys entering the facility after midnight, their cargo tarped and escorted by unmarked SUVs. A message from the shadows. On November 3rd, one of the same encrypted channels that had posted the earlier data leak came alive again, with a single message. Oak Ridge has resumed containment. Phase 2 has begun. The core is no longer dormant. Minutes later, the message and the server vanished. The timing wasn't coincidence. That same night, an unexplained EMP-like surge was detected across eastern Tennessee, briefly knocking out cell towers and scrambling local air traffic communications. Official reports called it a solar anomaly. But to those who had followed the story since McEwen, it felt like something else, something waking up. Inside Oak Ridge National Laboratory, whispers had replaced alarms. By mid-November 2025, the Phase 2 experiment, officially non-existent, had entered its most dangerous phase. Access to the underground vault was restricted to only 6 people, all under federal security clearance. Within days, 2 of them would vanish without explanation. The vanishing of Dr. Cole. Dr. Nathan Cole had been one of the lead researchers assigned to analyze the recovered TX-497 core. A quiet man in his 40s, Cole had previously worked on resonance mapping for clean energy systems, nothing close to weapons research. But according to leaked internal memos, his expertise in field harmonics made him essential to Phase 2 stabilization. On the evening of November 12th, Cole sent a final email to his wife from his lab terminal. "The readings aren't what we expected. If anything happens, look for the frequency logs." He never made it home. Security footage later showed him leaving the lab around 10:43 p.m., walking toward the lower elevator. But the feed cut out for exactly 3 minutes and 40 seconds. When it resumed, Cole was gone. His keycard stopped pinging anywhere on the facility's grid. The next morning, his workstation had been wiped clean. Every record of his employment, even his federal ID number, was erased from the system. The official report called it a personnel reassignment error. His wife received no answers, only a non-disclosure agreement and a threat of losing her husband's federal pension if she spoke publicly. The technician's warning. 4 days later, another insider, technician Luke Parrish, vanished after telling a colleague he'd seen something move inside the containment unit. According to internal logs later leaked to journalists, Parrish filed an incident report describing reactive plasma behavior inconsistent with inert containment. He wrote, "It's not just energy, it's adapting." That report was never acknowledged by superiors. Hours later, Parrish left the facility and was never seen again. His truck was found in the parking lot with the keys still in the ignition. The anonymous audio file. On November 19th, an audio clip surfaced on a whistleblower network used by journalists covering government secrecy. The 37-second recording, later verified as authentic, captured the sound of lab instruments followed by a voice, possibly Dr. Cole's, whispering, "It's self-resonating, no external input. If it keeps feeding, containment will fail. Tell them it remembers." The clip ended with a sharp metallic crack and a loud surge before cutting off completely. Experts who analyzed the background frequencies in the file said the noise wasn't static. It was a magnetic pulse repeating every 4.9 seconds, the same pulse detected near McEwen after the original explosion. The silence tightens. As pressure mounted, Oak Ridge went into complete lockdown. Researchers were ordered to surrender all personal devices, and digital communications were rerouted through encrypted federal servers. One anonymous employee described the atmosphere inside as cold fear. People stopped talking. Everyone knew something was wrong, but no one dared to ask. By Thanksgiving, 4 staff members had quietly resigned, citing family emergencies. None of them ever spoke publicly. The Department of Energy issued a final statement. No credible evidence of personnel misconduct or disappearance exists. But those still working inside knew better. The core was humming again, louder this time, and the line between science and something alive had begun to blur. It began at 2:11 a.m. on November 26, 2025. The night was calm over Oak Ridge. No storms, no wind, no warning. But deep underground, inside Vault 12B, the TX-497 core was no longer stable. Security logs recovered later described a sequence of events that no one was prepared for. At precisely 2:09 a.m., containment monitors began flashing "resonance spike detected." By 2:10, the energy output from the core had tripled. 2 minutes later, the entire facility trembled as if struck by an earthquake. The night of the surge had begun. The blackout. Every electronic device in a 10-mile radius went dark. Phones, radios, even car ignitions, all dead. The only light came from within the facility itself, as Vault 12B glowed a deep electric blue, visible through the ventilation shafts. An emergency technician named Carla Jensen, stationed on the surface level, described what she saw in her handwritten statement before it was confiscated. The lights flickered and everything went silent. No alarms, no hum, nothing. Then this low vibration started, like a heartbeat under the ground. It wasn't mechanical. It felt aware. The vibration intensified, spreading outward from the vault. Sensors captured what appeared to be a resonant electromagnetic pulse, oscillating at near biological frequency, the same kind used to monitor cardiac rhythms. The containment breach. At 2:17 a.m., surveillance footage, later leaked anonymously, showed the reinforced vault doors flexing inward under invisible pressure. Seconds later, a burst of light flooded the corridor, white and blue, like lightning trapped in fog. Personnel in nearby wings described their radios screaming with distortion, voices layered over static as if multiple transmissions were playing at once. Then the power grid collapsed completely. The entire Oak Ridge facility went dark. For 11 minutes, no communication left the complex. Even military satellites orbiting overhead failed to capture real-time visuals. When the systems came back online, every feed from Vault 12B was missing, deleted, overwritten, or corrupted. Only one image survived, a single frame from a security camera at 2:18 a.m. It showed the containment chamber empty. The TX-497 core was gone. The aftermath: by dawn, the facility was sealed off by the Department of Defense. Unmarked helicopters circled the area, while black transport trucks moved in and out under heavy escort. The official statement the next morning called it a temporary electrical failure resulting in localized damage. No mention of the blue light, no mention of the surge, and certainly no mention of the missing personnel. Yet in nearby towns, Kingston, Oliver Springs, Clinton, residents woke to shattered windows, disabled electronics, and a faint metallic hum in the air that lingered for hours. One local described it best. It was like the ground itself was remembering something, a signal in the static. At 5:46 a.m., a radio enthusiast in Harriman, 15 miles west, recorded an unusual transmission across multiple frequencies. The voice was faint, distorted, but repeated the same words 3 times. Containment breached, Phase 3 initiated. The signal originated from the direction of Oak Ridge. And then, silence. By dawn, on November 27, 2025, the once bustling scientific hub of Oak Ridge, Tennessee, had become a ghost town. Roadblocks appeared overnight. Drones circled the perimeter. Local residents woke to find checkpoints manned by soldiers wearing no unit insignia and carrying scanners that hummed faintly whenever they passed. The Department of Defense released a single-page statement at 7:00 a.m. Oak Ridge National Laboratory is temporarily closed due to an internal systems malfunction. There is no public danger. But the people of East Tennessee knew danger when they saw it, and this time, it didn't come from outside. The evacuation within hours. The federal government quietly ordered an evacuation of a 5-mile radius around the lab. The official reasoning was hazardous chemical exposure, but satellite images told another story. Rows of black containment vehicles, heat signatures inside the vault still glowing like embers, and helicopters scanning the ridgelines with radiation detectors. Eyewitnesses reported seeing columns of blue light erupting from the ground during the night. The glow lasted less than 30 seconds, but for those who saw it, it was unforgettable. "It wasn't fire," said a Kingston resident. "It was alive, like lightning that didn't want to leave." By noon, Oak Ridge had vanished from civilian maps. Every digital reference to Vault 12B, Phase 2, or TX-497, was purged from public archives. The recovery team, a specialized recovery team known internally as Echo Division, arrived the following day. Their mission was to secure the anomaly, but according to leaked internal memos, the core wasn't where it was supposed to be. Residual field detected, but no object present, one report read. Source appears mobile. Security drones patrolling the nearby woods recorded fluctuations in electromagnetic readings, the same 4.9 Hz pulse detected during the original McEwen explosion. By December the 1st, tracking data abruptly stopped. Whatever signal they were following, it simply disappeared. The witness. 1 week later, a truck driver passing near Watts Bar Lake, 20 miles south, reported seeing a man walking barefoot along the shoulder of the highway. He was pale, covered in soot, and wearing a tattered AES uniform. When the driver slowed down, the man turned to face him. His eyes glowed faintly blue in the headlights. He said one thing, the driver later told police. He said, "It remembers." Then he walked back into the woods. The driver's dashcam footage was seized by federal agents within hours. He was told not to speak of it again. The blackout. On December 3rd, a second EMP-like surge hit parts of Tennessee, Alabama, and Kentucky. It lasted only 6 minutes, but during that time, thousands of electronic devices recorded the same interference pattern. TX-497 active, phase 3. Then the pattern vanished, as if it had never existed. No trace of the signal could be found afterward. No record in official systems, no explanation from Washington. The public never heard about the second surge. The final disappearance. Weeks later, a journalist, Samantha Kerr, the same reporter who had followed the original McEwen blast, received a package postmarked from Oak Ridge. Inside was a flash drive containing 2 files, a photo of an empty lab corridor, and a sound file labeled TX-497 Final Delude. When played, it contained a low hum, gradually rising in frequency. At the 37-second mark, a voice whispered through the static, "It's awake." That was the last anyone heard from Kerr. Her apartment was found empty 3 days later. The legacy. To this day, the federal government maintains that the McEwen explosion was an accident and that Oak Ridge remains a secure research facility. No mention of TX-497, no mention of the 19 missing workers, and certainly no mention of Phase 3. But those who still live near the Tennessee River swear that on quiet nights, when the air is still, they can feel a low pulse beneath their feet, a rhythm that hums like a memory refusing to die. "It's not over," one former Oak Ridge engineer said anonymously. "It never ended, it just moved." What happened in Tennessee was not just a tragedy, it was a warning, a secret buried beneath science, wrapped in silence, and sealed by power. 19 people vanished without a trace, and the truth disappeared with them. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, the ones they try hardest to erase, share this video, subscribe, and help us expose what others fear to confront. Because somewhere in the hills of Tennessee, something that was once human-made may still be awake.